What is up, Nets fans? Welcome to the Brooklyn Buzz. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Jac Manuell. Jac, what's up?
Nets news, Nets news, Nets news, Nets news, Nets news.
Yes, there is Nets news, and with all this spotlight on Brooklyn, we're going to have plenty to talk about.
There is so much, and we'll jump right in. We'll dive right in. Do you want to give that little spiel you do at the top of the Nick, before I get in?
Yes, you can find the Buzz on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, Dash Radio, YouTube, and NetsRepublic.com. Also head to Design/Off the Glass for some Brooklyn Buzz tees. Use discount code OTG5, save yourself $5. But Jac, all you.
Yeah, that's DSGN tree for those that might mess up the spelling. But I guess we're going to start off with what has been making the rounds today, Nick. And the number one sort of point on Nets Twitter is those jerseys
Are trash.
Finish my sentence for me.
Yeah, they can't kill every jersey. We were kind of talking on it before we started recording. And the Kogi jerseys were amazing. These ones, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't the best jersey that I've ever seen. I like the grey. I think that they come off as amateur because there's only a fine line when it comes to graffiti design. That is that you can only nail so much. So yeah, I respect the sort of desire to go down this route of a sort of cool graffiti style because it's sort of old school New York, old school Brooklyn. It sort of brings that sort of vibe, but I think that in terms of what was supposed to happen and how they were supposed to nail it, it just wasn't great. I think that, you can't nail them all, as you sort of said, Nick, but, I'm not going to be buying this one, but I'm sure I'll purchase plenty of other Joe Harris memorabilia.
And I'm sure they'll drop plenty of other fire gear.
But, yeah, it wasn't the best thing I've ever seen. And I don't think I'm as bad on it as everyone. Like, for you calling it trash, I think it's like a nice form of trash. It's like compost. Like, it's not it's not the worst jersey that I've ever seen. There's been some worse ones out there. But it's certainly one of the worst Brooklyn Nets ones. So in that sort of sense, we'll get to some better stuff, some more positive stuff to discuss around the Brooklyn Nets. And training camp has provided plenty so far, Nick. And we're going to go back a couple of days where Jarrett Allen was probably the standout of the Nets training camp. Does this mean that we're going to see Jarrett Allen as a starter, or is it just more so the fact that he's putting in some work already and DeAndre Jordan is getting the best out of him?
Yeah, I think it's a step in the right direction. Still plenty of training camp, plenty of preseason left. So I feel like, him competing early on and kind of working with DeAndre should only get the best out of both guys. So I'm excited to see him kind of take the challenge instead of kind of step down. I didn't really worry about that in Jarrett, but sometimes you do see young players when a veteran comes in kind of be a little intimidated.
Yeah, and Kenny Atkinson was the one who singled out Jarrett Allen as the standout of day 3. He said it was Jarrett Allen. If I can only pick one, let him be the standout. And then Jordan was incredibly complimentary of him as well in terms of their battles in training camp. He said, I think it's going great. Jarrett is a great young player. He's proven to be a great rim protector, and he's getting even better each year. And we're definitely challenging him every day in practice. I think for us, being able to battle against each other every day is going to be good, not only for us individually, but great for our team. And I think that relates to sort of what I was sort of saying when I put it to you that could this battle be a negative effect, could have a negative adverse effect on these guys and the team overall? Seems to be the opposite.
Yeah, it seems like also from what I've heard from Kenny, it's just the competition has been good competition. It hasn't been that negative, leave you with a sour taste competition. Guys are getting along, having fun, and competing at a high level. I'm really excited to see what happens and how much better DeAndre can make Jarrett.
Yeah, and I think that at the end of the day, that's the main thing. We saw Ed Davis have an effect on Jarrett Allen, and I'll probably say mostly as a screener and rebounder, whereas we know DeAndre probably possesses more of an offensive, more polished offensive game, and is probably a bit more, pizzazz with his offensive game than Ed Davis is, who's probably a little more grit and grind, get the offensive boards and such. But Nick, also in that sort of day, DeAndre was asked about shooting threes. He said, hell no way. If I came out here and started shooting threes, then you're going to be like, DeAndre, we shouldn't have signed that guy. Whatever they need me to do, I'm working on different aspects, but whatever shots I'm going to get in our offense and whatever I'm going to be able to do to help us win more games and lengthen our postseason, that's what I'm going to do. But he's not taking threes.
I like it. I mean, it's not trying to change his game late in his career. Obviously he knows what he's good at. He's going to continue to do that, and that's playing the role the team needs him to do.
Yeah, and I think that's the main thing at the end of the day. He knows what he is as a player. You know, he's in the twilight of his career. So yeah, those are sort of the notes from the early point of training camp. And obviously there was another sort of point in the fact that everyone's loving Joey buckets, but everyone's sort of also focusing on the fact that, you know, the management of his minutes, Nick. Kyrie had some good things to say about him. I miss playing with Joe. That's my dude. I've loved Joe since our Cleveland days. They developed a love. Joe got drafted in Cleveland. I knew he was going to be special. He didn't play on one team at a time, so that was just Brooklyn gave him the chance. They gave him the opportunity, and now he's performing. It seems to me that Joe Harris had somewhat of an impact as well on recruiting Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, I definitely think he did. Obviously, you know, they know each other, having a previous relationship. I'm sure he asked him a few questions. And I also think Joe is the type of player that stars enjoy playing with because he's not going to really complain about getting the ball. He's going to run around the court, create space for you, and he's a lockdown three-point shooter, so he's going to get you assists left and right. You know, what more can you ask for?
You can't ask for more. You know, Joe Harris stand-up. We'll be doing our player preview very, very soon on that one, and it's going to be about 3 hours long, so be prepared.
It's going to be our first solo Brooklyn Buzz.
Yeah, Nick's not jumping on. I'm going to be dropping just consistent Joe Harris pods throughout it's going to be co-hosted by Jac Manuell and hosted by Jac Manuell. But Sean Marks was sort of saying in regards to his workload, and by the New York Post, Nick, in regards to the workload, we've got to be very careful with a guy like that who's carried a really big load for the last 2 or 3 months, but he had an incredible opportunity to be out there and represent his country. He did a marvelous job.
Yeah, I think you really do have to worry about it because also he played in the playoffs last year, some extended minutes there, going to Team USA. And also I think he said the camp overall, the whole experience was like 50 days, a lot of travel. You know, I'd play it safe with him. You need him for the season. You don't want to overwork him. You have some depth early in the year. You know, make his life easy.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of relating to those training loads, they sort of said they monitor a lot of our training loads, and they did it even while I was away, and he's talking about the Nets training stuff. So they knew where my body was at in terms of the high-intensity load. So coming back, it's been sort of 2 weeks off, just short recovery training sessions, and he's tapering back into live work, where at the start of training camp, he can be full-on and ready to go. So it's that balance, and I think that if we know any other sort of training stuff, we harp on it, and we're going to continue to harp on it until proven otherwise, that Joe is going to be peaking at the start of the regular season. And, you know, how many minutes we'll see in the preseason doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah, I agree, Jack. I mean, who's going to nail Joe Harris stuff other than you?
No one, absolutely no one. And I will fight anyone to the death about that. But in that sort of sense, Nick, there's been some other sort of camp notes. There's been talk around Rodions and Musa and Rodions Kurucs, and in that sort of sense, you know, Roddy's been taking the 3 ball. He seems to be really confident with it, letting it fly, and Musa is stepping up as defensive player. Are you liking what you're hearing out of camp for these guys?
Yeah, obviously we haven't done the player previews for those two, but 2 things we would look for. You know, Rodions improved that 3-point shot, which he shot last year inconsistently. And then Musa, my question mark for him is always, can he play NBA level defense? So if they're improving those 2 areas, it just continues to add to this roster.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, Kenny didn't guarantee any minutes. He sort of said they have to earn it. They have to earn their spot in the rotation because of course, I know them a little better from last season. It'll just have to play out, but they'll have to earn their minutes. So in that sort of sense, it's going to be a deep rotation. And I think Kenny did say that his magic number is generally 10, but we know that he sort of sometimes likes to keep it to 9. But we're pretty deep, and I think that the Rodions is probably obviously ahead of Musa in terms of that respect because he's got the defensive acumen. He's got the sort of, you know, chemistry with the team already. He's proven it. But, you know, I could see Musa earning some minutes too. Yeah,
the one thing also Rodions has on the side is just that position that he plays. You know, small forward, power forward. There's more minutes there where you're looking at the guard spots. You know, Musa's going to have a hard time breaking that rotation where Rodions, the Nets almost need him to be good to kind of hit another level where, no disrespect to Musa, if he doesn't have a great season, it isn't necessarily going to impact the win-loss total.
Yeah, and I think that before we move on, it was interesting that he did mention 2, 3, 4 when it came to Musa. He said that, yes, he's shooting the ball much better and progressing defensively, which are two big things. You've got to be a 3-and-D guy at the 4-3-2 position. That's all we're helping him out with. So definitely Musa, I'm really pleased with his progress. I'm not sure if you were speaking in general about the 4-3-2, but we know Musa has some size about him.
Yeah,
in terms of height, at least.
I could see him getting minutes at the 3. I think defensively, he's probably too far behind for him to get minutes at the 4, and I don't think he's, a physically imposing player. He did look bigger at media day, but obviously we got to see that on the court. But I could see him getting minutes at small forward.
Yeah, it's, when you got these guys who just have skill sets that don't necessarily fit into one mold and one position, I think that that's almost a better thing. And I think that Coach Kenny has always sort of been about emphasizing not necessarily guard forward. Yes, that you need to have your centers as your sort of stalwarts and your ball hand, maybe your point guard. But in between, you want guys who have varied sort of skill sets. And a guy that's got a varied skill set for a big man is our boy, Nic Claxton, Nick. And everyone's talking this dude up.
I like it. We were impressed with what he did in Summer League, showing off some of those skills he developed in college. Obviously, we talked about him needing to polish them to a higher level and have a better understanding of the NBA game and physically taking that next step. But hey, there's an opportunity for a rookie to pop off. We've seen it in years past with Rodions and Jarrett Allen. Maybe Nic Claxton's the next one.
Yeah, and I think that Jordan said Nick reminds me of Chris Bosh a little bit. We've made that comparison when we were talking
Coach
about
Kenny
with
did too.
Coach Kenny did as well with Dalton on the Brooklyn Buzz when we were doing our draft review. Musa said that he's a great talent. He's got a really high ceiling. But for himself, and this was from Claxton at training camp, I'm just going to hoop wherever I am, whether it's Long Island or whether it's in Brooklyn. I'm just going to do whatever I can to become better. And at the end of the day, I'll know I'll be here in the NBA to stay for a very long time. I like the confidence, but I like the measured confidence from a kid like that.
Yeah, and I love the fact he was like, I'll play wherever. And I think he also talked on Media Day saying he has no issue going to Long Island at all and developing his skills. So I think he's really happy and understands the opportunity in front of him in Brooklyn, what they've done with other young players, and also having some of the best NBA players of, he's probably personally ever seen in Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, and I think in that sense, I know we touched on Jarrett Allen as a power forward. It was sort of making the rounds. On 2K, they play those lineups, which is frustrating as hell whenever I'm trying to win a game. But I think Nic Claxton, out of the 3 big guys that we have, he has the best potential to play as a power forward. I think
100%.
Mechanically, he has the best 3-point shot, the best offensive game, and the best sort of malleable overall skill set that I think would fit. And I think maybe we could see that in next season. I think there is a sort of, we've spoken about consistently, probably since we started this podcast, the fact that the Nets have really lacked a power forward presence. Claxton could fit in there, you reckon?
I think so, and I think he has the best switch ability out of DeAndre, Jarrett Allen, and himself. Be obviously a little bit thinner and not necessarily ready to play the center position. I think if he got minutes this year, it definitely could be at the 4. And you're not going to really battle with that many big 4s in the NBA. You have Sabonis and Al Horford are 2 guys that come to mind in the East. But other than that, I think Claxton will be able to get some minutes at the 4, especially if the opportunity pops up. We know the whole Rodion situation isn't established yet. And then the Wilson Chandler suspension, they might need him to step up at the 4.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it seems to me that we've got another quality young big, and I'm really excited to see what he can bring on the floor. He's got a tremendous skill set. And if you want, a bit more in-depth sort of stuff on that, netsrepublic.com, I did a little bit of a video breakdown of him a couple of months ago. But Kyrie Irving was having some thoughts as well on training camp, Nick. He was saying just to be out here competing with the guys, getting through our scripted plays, enjoying the camaraderie, the competition, having everybody out here raise their level of play and just be dialed in. It's a great thing for us.
Yeah, you love seeing, one of your best players out on the court. And I think DeAndre mentioned, when Kyrie was out there, the intensity level picked up another level. It hit up another notch.
Yeah, I think that that's going to happen. And I think he also said in relation to his teammates, anything that I can utilize for our offense to be more fluent, I'm willing to do. I'm going to give guys space to be special. Karras is one of the guys. Spencer Zimmerman's one of those guys. Joe also can go off the screen to shoot. So I think that we've sort of talked about, how is the offense going to change around Kyrie Irving in comparison to D'Angelo Russell? Yes, we know D'Lo is a much better passer in terms of just the simple passing acumen, but it seems like Kyrie is going to let his teammates shine too.
Yeah, I think he is. And I think he kind of, like we mentioned on the Media Day pod, he learned a lot in Boston about how to handle his teammates and, letting some of these young guys take their skill set to the next level and help them do that. Kyrie wants to be that guy. He wants to be a better teammate, and he wants to make his teammates better.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I think that we've seen this. He's bought in tremendously already to the Brooklyn Nets franchise, and he's just going to do whatever he can to make this team better. I think that everyone's sort of, even at this early stage, starting to really understand his buy-in to the franchise as a whole. So I'm really excited to sort of see that. But I guess moving on to Kevin Durant, despite the fact that he's supposed to be rehabbing, Nick, and he's rehabbing right next to the guys.
I like it. I think I saw a video of him at practice shooting some free throws with Kyrie Irving. So him being there, just obviously his presence, kind of everybody wanting to impress their new teammate, Kevin Durant, if healthy, maybe the best player in the NBA. I think it's a positive vibe. And obviously you see him grinding in the rehab room. You're grinding on the court. It's just positive vibes all the way.
Yeah, and he's doing so in one of the most fire hoodies that I've ever seen.
Yes.
I need to get me one of those. I might slide into KD's DMs and ask him where he purchased it, or if he can get me one, I'll be over there in just a couple of weeks' time. By the way, yeah, I will be in New York from October 28th to November 6th. So for those that want to catch up, grab a beer, or I'll be at a few of the games with Nick as well at the J-Man JBT. But on relation to Kevin Durant, the quotes from Kenny are pretty positive. He's been rehabbing courtside. He's watching what we're doing and walking around to our station, encouraging guys and having dialogue. It's been a real nice balance. He's been super present, and it's been really good so far.
Yeah, and I might be looking too much into this, but I think it's really great. He's already building more of a relationship with a lot of the guys. We already know he's established a relationship with Kyrie and DeAndre and somewhat Karis LeVert, but some of the other guys on the team have never really talked to KD. And like I mentioned, this is one of the best players in the NBA. It can be a little intimidating. And developing that relationship this year before he comes back, or for later in the season, I think it's great for the team.
Yeah, it's Musa and Rodions. I'm pretty sure it's their favorite player, or at least one of their favorite players, and they were taking photos and stuff at media day. So that was really fun. But Kenny sort of said individually about the relationship he's been trying to build. He'll said, "I'll go over to him in practice and say, what do you think of this? What did you guys do in Golden State? What did you do in OKC?" You're always having those dialogues. He might chime in and say something, but it seems to me he's a guy who's an observer, an early observer. He's watching everything. He's aware. You can see that awareness. He doesn't say a lot, but when he says something, you stand and pay attention because it's always something relevant.
I like it. I mean, that's kind of the vibe you get from KD. He's not a big talker. He sees a lot of things, as we know. He's very active on Twitter and will jump into random mentions. So he is almost wants to know everything or be aware of everything.
Yeah, and I think in that sort of sense, we spoke about when Coach Kenny was on a podcast speaking about the fact that Kevin Durant is going to be a faux assistant coach for him. Seems to me he's already trying to establish that sort of fact at this early point. But, we're only a couple of days in, but it's good signs so far. But I sort of alluded to it earlier, Nick, and I think I'll give the quote on it in terms about Coach Kenny with the rotation. He said, my experience is that depth is vital in this league, especially with our experience last season with the injuries we had. As hard as guys play today, the pace of the game, there's going to be injuries. We have last year, we relied on all 15 of the guys. I harp back to the Theo game against the Knicks, where he came from the G League, had 20 points and helped us win it. I think that we need that depth as far as a permanent rotation. 10 was the ideal number, but I'm not going to promise that. It'll play itself out.
He could switch it up. He talked about taking his game to the next level. I don't think it would be terrible if you played 11 or 12, especially if the Nets plan on turning up the pace this year, which I think is a real possibility considering some of the pieces on the roster, and I would like it. I wouldn't mind playing 11. Obviously in big games, you want to play 9 or 10, that's fine. But throughout the year, it's a grind, and guys are going to be banged up. So I honestly feel like the entire roster is going to see minutes at some point because that's how it felt last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, we're not going to see just one sort of set rotation. We know that Coach Kenny is pretty flexible when it comes to that. But, I think that number of 9 or 10, like I said earlier, seems to me the way to go. But, when Kevin Durant gets back, who misses out on those minutes as well. So for now, I think it's about establishing chemistry, establishing on-court chemistry more than anything, and seeing what fits best for different lineups, because guys we haven't even spoken about, and guys that we'll speak about a little bit more now, is guys like David Nwaba and guys like Jarrett Temple. Apparently, David Nwaba, people are talking to him about being the next Marcus Smart.
That's interesting. I did not hear that one yet, but hey, if he wants to kind of take on that role, I love it. I mean,
Uh,
we heard about the defense of him possibly guarding fours, and he brings a tenacity. And obviously, his offensive game isn't necessarily there, but either was Marcus Smart's at first. He's kind of developed that in the years, and last year was probably one of his better offensive seasons. But if he was able to bring that defensive grit to the team, that would be a huge boost off the bench.
Yeah, and I think I saw a defensive sort of video on the Brooklyn Nets page, and where everyone was getting really hyped at the D that David Nwaba was playing, and he made a comment on that. It's about pride. I don't want anyone to score on me ever. It's a challenge that I pride myself on stepping up and taking every day.
That's exactly what you want to hear. From a player like that, that's what we want from our bench players and guys that come in, and the Nets got him on a steal of a contract. So I can't
Yeah,
really say more.
exactly. And in terms of, he spoke a little bit more about Cleveland and Brooklyn and how he sort of landed there. I had some injuries and he kept me out of some games, so I knew it was going to affect my free agency. Brooklyn was one of the teams to reach out to me. So being a part of this winning culture, I've been a part of losing teams. So just to be a part of a team that made the playoffs, I wanted to be a part of that. Guys that go out there and compete hard every day. He's going to fit in pretty well.
Yeah, he definitely is. And everybody I talked to from like Cleveland fans or Cleveland media said that we'll love Nwaba and just what he brings to the team. And obviously, he did those video threads earlier in the year, kind of breaking him down and what he can bring. And I think there's a fit for him. He's a nice complementary player that's been on bad teams with not many stars. Now you put him on a team with some stars and some good players, he can do what he does best.
Yeah, and he sort of said, those things that he does best, diving for loose balls, taking charges, the ugly plays win games, which is really positive to see. And Kenny made some comments on him as well. We felt him defensively today. Everyone felt him in the gym, and that's how you make a mark in as a role player in this league. We all saw that today, that he can add that element. It's important.
And the Nets really haven't necessarily had these type of players. They haven't had somebody to come off the bench and just throw at a wing who's on fire, that someone's just going to annoy them the entire time on their court. We've seen Karis LeVert play some good defense, Rondé play some good defense in the past, but they haven't really had that guy who's just going to go out there and just really annoy you the entire time he's on the court.
Yeah, and Atkinson said that, there's been some emphasis on his three-point shot, and he's really happy with his defensive instincts, and he's strong. And I think, as David Nwaba said as well, that being on a team with a coach that believes in you makes the game way easier. I'm excited about whatever opportunity I get at any position. I have no issue guarding bigger guys. Do you see a similar role for him that we saw for Trevion Graham last season?
Yeah, I think we've hinted at it the past too, is that that's something you can do and maybe even be a better version of what we wanted Trevion Graham to be. So, I mean, Nwaba is a guy that's kind of like one of those low-key guys that we haven't really talked a lot about, similar to Jarrett Temple, that might just pop off this year and come up clutch for you when you really need it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I guess we'll move on to the other guy that we sort of alluded to in Jarrett Temple, and he sort of had some quotes as well on his experience so far. It's been great. It makes it that much sweeter. The first 2 years in my career were up and down, out of the D League, going overseas, having to grind, make a spot in the league my 4th year, and then been blessed to have a spot since. So I expect guys like David, Lance Thomas, and guys like CJ Williams trying to make the squad, but it makes it that much sweeter, and I'm incredibly grateful.
Yeah, that's the type of guy you want in the locker room, supporting these guys, trying to live out their dreams. And Garrett Temple's going to appreciate this opportunity. And if I'm not mistaken, Garrett Temple hasn't really played in a ton of winning teams either. So he's probably really enjoying this, especially with the possibility of a deep playoff run.
Yeah, and he made just comments on the roster overall, like you sort of were talking about there, Nick. We have a group of young guys that are very humble, very skilled, can play the game, but understand that veterans have some insight into stuff that they don't know yet, so they're willing to learn. But it's always a feeling out process when you get to a new team. It's great that you got some vets coming in that know each other a little bit, and we know each other's leadership styles a good bit, so we can get together as a unit. I think there were some really nice tidbits and nice things to take away from that quote.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, I listened to Garrett Temple on a podcast over the summer, and I really liked him. And he just feels like a great guy to have in the locker room. We talked about this, losing Jared Dudley, losing DeMarre Carroll, losing Ed Davis. You bring in a guy like Garrett Temple, he can kind of fill some of that void.
Yeah, and I think that we sort of spoke about, I like the fact that he was talking about that we know each other's leadership styles, whether he was talking about Kyrie or DeAndre there. I think that's where you have, and obviously we have our young guys. We sort of spoke about Karis and Jarrett before, that they're just so willing to take on things, and they just know they don't really care, who scores or who's getting the media coverage or whatever. They're just happy to be a part of this team. So I think one thing that we've spoken about before in terms of chemistry, it's already starting to build.
100%. And Obviously, that's been the biggest question mark from a lot of national media. Will this Nets team gel? They've had such a good vibe last year. Is Kyrie going to ruin it? Blah, blah, blah. Everything's looking good so far, but obviously the real games haven't started yet.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll get to your boy, Caris LeVert. I didn't think we'd be able to do a podcast without some Caris LeVert talk, or else I probably wouldn't be allowed back on as a co-host. But Kenny was sort of saying, as playing Kyrie a little bit off ball. Kyrie's a great catch and shoot shooter. Kyrie always tells me I'm really good off the ball too. So when Caris is driving, you have another shooter out there. So I think it works well. I always say that I love multiple ball handlers, multiple downhill guys. At the end of the day, that's what sucks the defense in.
Yeah, and we talked about that a lot on Kyrie's player preview, how impressed and how excited we were about Kyrie's off-ball ability and how he actually might fit really well with Karras and Spencer. And hearing it from Kenny, obviously that's great. And you have a guy like Karras who can cook guys one-on-one, get in the paint. And now you have a guy like Joe Harris, Taurean Prince, and Kyrie Irving on the perimeter. There's going to be an open three somewhere.
Yeah, and LeVert's already loving him sort of self. But, Atkinson think that there's another jump for Caris LeVert. And I think that, Spencer said in the past that Caris is probably one of the coach's pets. So we're obviously going to hear some high praise of him. But he says he has really high potential in his opinion. I remember those first, how many games was it before that he got hurt? We're all saying this guy's ready to make an all-star jump. Of course, it was early. We won a couple of games that he was really dominating. And then let's hop to the playoffs when he started to hit his stride. I think that was really when he started to hit it. You could argue he was our best player in the playoffs. He was. There's some noise in there, but I always say this is about there are guys who want to be great, and then there are guys that are desperate to be great. He's in that desperate category. And there's only a small percentage of guys who are like that.
And I think that's what separates Karras, where, people might have seen, the scouting report or where he's drafted or seen what he did in the league, the last few seasons. But he's the type that is going to kind of push the ceilings that people have put on him. He's going to kind of take his game to the next level. It just always kind of makes me think about a guy like Jimmy Butler, where, Butler coming to the league, nobody really thought much of him. Next thing you know, he's turned himself into an all-star level player, and that's kind of what we're hoping Karras can do. Turn himself into an all-star level player. Obviously, there's talent and athleticism there, but the work ethic is what makes him great.
Yeah, and the strength, apparently, Jarrett Temple was sort of saying, obviously, he can really score the ball. Offensively, he's very gifted. He plays like he's 230 pounds when he's really like 200. With his ability to create off the dribble, he's going to be a really good player in this league for a long time.
We know that the strength increase last year was a big reason for the success he had, and it wasn't as noticeable because I believe a lot of his work in the offseason in terms of the gym was for his lower body, building that strong base, not being able to get kind of pushed around when you establish yourself in the paint. And if he can keep improving in that, then he's going to be drawing fouls left and right and getting great position.
Yeah, and there was obviously some highlight video. We saw him.
It was great.
It was him hanging in the air with that sort of strength, and obviously Karras is incredibly strong, despite the fact that he may not look it. I think that basketball strength compared to just normal conventional strength, there's a difference sort of between that. So Karras is certainly going to be doing his thing. Nick, were you a little bit annoyed that you get invited to Dave & Buster's for Kevin Durant's 31st birthday?
I was kind of upset. Maybe we should have crashed it.
True. Well, I wish his birthday was a little bit later, but it seemed like he was having a bit of fun, even though Kyrie was probably having more fun at his own birthday.
Yeah, I could see it. Kyrie looked pretty happy in the pictures. I mean, who wouldn't have fun at Dave & Buster's? I've actually never been there.
I've been to a Dave & Buster's in Philadelphia. How have you not been to Dave & Buster's being like, lived there your entire life?
Maybe that's something we have to do when you come to town.
Absolutely, I will. I'm not great at pop a shot. I'm okay, but it's
I just
not my
like
best
cheat and don't shoot like a regular basketball. I just like whatever way the hoop is, and I just like establish a way to kind of just get it in and get as quick a release as possible. Because obviously, like to break the high score, you have to just like be crazy and getting the ball out and in, and you can't really miss.
No, it's not about like really shooting it. I'm similar. I just want to get the ball off and get it into the bucket. Doesn't matter how it gets in there. But yeah, we might have to do that. If anyone else wants to do hit up Dave & Buster's with me at the JMN JBT, I'll be over there very soon. But Nick, a couple more things. I'm not sure if you read it. Chris Herring had an article on 538 talking about what will the Nets look like before Kevin Durant is back, and there were some key questions throughout. And I think I'm just going to ask you them sort of straight up. Can all the Brooklyn ball handlers get theirs?
Yeah, I actually glanced at the piece. I didn't get to read it pretty in depth. Obviously, I try to read the stuff that Chris writes. It's always usually really good. And also, I wanted to see how he kind of balanced the prediction by their website and how it related to the article. But we just alluded to it. Kyrie being really good off ball, Karras and Spencer working the summer to be better off ball. I think there will be enough touches. And if you really think about it, there's not many other guys in the team that are going to really have the ball in their hands a lot, and they're going to be like, all right, these guys need to score. We need to get them shots. Joe Harris and Taurean Prince are two guys that come to mind, but the rest of the roster are guys where it's going to be a different guy kind of every night stepping up off the bench.
Yeah, and I think that the sort of main thing he pointed out was that Kyrie Irving had a fourth quarter usage of 34%. Russell was at D'Angelo's was 30%. Dinwiddie and LeVert were at 26 and 24 respectively. But you want to put the ball in Kyrie Irving's hands because, as Herring alluded to, Kyrie Irving and the Celtics had the best clutch offense in the NBA last year. So I know that we spoke about plenty of clutch games with the Brooklyn Nets last season, but I'm a little more confident in having the ball in Kyrie's hands in those fourth quarter situations.
And I will say this, and I don't think people really talk about this enough with Boston last year. There really isn't a ton of playmakers on that team. There's guys that can kind of score on their own, but there's not guys who can initiate the offense or run and pick and roll and things along those lines. Like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum were still developing their games. Gordon Hayward, obviously a shell of himself, and Terry Rozier just had a bad season. And Al Horford's not really going to create offense. He's going to be more of a complement to guys. So I think it's also just like a different role for Kyrie this year compared to the roster he played with last year.
Yeah, and I think that the fit and everything is probably going to bode well, at least for a large chunk of the regular season. But the next sort of point was, what version of DeAndre Jordan is Brooklyn getting? I'm not sure if you saw the sort of stats that Chris Herring alluded to, Nick, but there are some positive ones and there are some negative ones in terms of, he held shooters to more than 6 percentage points beneath their average when around the rim, and he also led the league in defensive rebound percentage for the second season running. But at the same time, he did only contest 4 shots a game at the rim. So it's a catch sort of 22. Do we need DeAndre to contest more shots at the rim? Do we need to be more engaged on that sort of defensive side within the paint?
Yes, and yes, I think, we kind of mentioned it. It's been, a couple down seasons for DeAndre. He just hasn't been fully engaged playing his best basketball. Some of that's been the situation. Some of that's just been on him. And we're hoping Kyrie and KD can kind of push him to be the better guy. And Jarrett Allen competing with him might cook some, things he hasn't really thought about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I'm probably, maybe it's just a bias and an inherent optimism that I don't normally possess, but I think that DeAndre is going to be a little bit better. So it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be the best in the league, but I think we're going to probably want from him as well as those screens. I think that if he can get open shots for Kyrie Irving and Joe Harris, as sort of Chris Herring was alluded to, then that's the sort of point. I know that Joe Harris made a real point of it last season about how open Ed Davis would get him to get those open sort of shots. We need DeAndre to do that to an even greater level next season.
I agree. And DeAndre is a big dude. Like Ed Davis obviously is a tough dude, but DeAndre is just huge. Like if he sets a screen, he's creating space. We know what Chris Paul did with him back in the day with the Clippers. Obviously, Luka had some success with him, but he's a guy that, Joe Harris should become best buddies with because he'll be getting him some open threes.
Yep, and at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want that sort of chemistry, and hopefully there's work being done at training camp in relation to that. The sort of final question, Nick, and I think it's one that we sort of alluded to a little bit. Is there enough front court scoring without Durant? Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. But the real question is, do the Nets need it? Like with all the guards they have, and they do have perimeter scoring, and obviously there's going to be questions about scoring inside, but guys like Spencer can attack the paint. Guys like Karras, Kyrie getting in there and dropping off the passes for DeAndre and Jarrett Allen. That's what we want to see. It's not like, I think it'd be better in a situation where you have more perimeter scoring than if you had more interior scoring, because it's a lot easier to shut down the interior than it is to shut down the outside.
Yeah, and I think in that sort of sense, we were just recording a Blazers podcast, and if we're talking about front court scoring, they really lack some front court. They lack that front court depth in a similar sort of sense to the Brooklyn Nets. But I'd probably say that the Nets have some better forwards in relation to them. We spoke about Korich taking the 3-point shot, being a bit more confident. We spoke about Musa hitting the 3-ball and playing a bit better defense. Taurean Prince is really, really engaged defensively, it seems, and that three ball is always going to drop with a guy like him. He's really got that sort of mark, and Spencer's already calling him the second best three-point shooter, as we've talked about earlier. So I like what you sort of said. It's not that we necessarily need it. And in lineups where the lineup that I really want to see is, Kyrie, Spencer, Karras, Torian, and whether it be DeAndre Jordan or Jarrett Allen out there. Because for me, you got a ridiculous amount of guys who can handle the ball and 3 guys who can shoot the 3 ball incredibly capably. That's a lineup that I'm really sort of intrigued to see. And that's not necessarily a really front court heavy team, so to speak.
I would love that lineup. I think it'd be a ton of fun. And I think it's one we'll definitely see this year, too. Kenny's already mentioned about going to that 3-guard lineup. And obviously, Prince is going to be a guy who sees a lot of minutes at the 4. And Jarrett and DeAndre obviously fit in that center role.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's going to be plenty of lineups, and we'll probably be discussing it a little bit more. Maybe we might have to add it as a topic point. Lineups that we're excited to see heading into the 2019-20 season. But a final one, Nick, and we've sort of touched on Coach Kenny, but he spoke a little bit more in depth to the New York Post, and some quotes that I'd like to get your reaction on. And he sort of spoke about the fact that he was nervous initially about acquiring the superstars in Kyrie and KD. He's like, wow, how am I going to coach these guys? This is going to be different. I always felt like I got along with every guy and every team I've been a part with, whether you're the 17th guy or the first guy. I can't change who I am because the guys will always spot that right away. You have to be yourself. And even once I realized that we were getting some incredible players, that's what I knew. I had to be true to who I am.
And I think that's what the players love. Kevin Durant and Kyrie, like KD said, Kenny seems really genuine. And then Kyrie said he really loves Kenny is because he's straight up and honest. So it was a big reason they came. And I respect Kenny for being honest too in that situation. He's established himself to some extent in the NBA, but now you're getting 2 of the best players. How are you going to coach these guys? How much do they respect me? So being yourself is usually the best way to go in most life situations.
Exactly. No, exactly. And I guess the final sort of quote, Nick, he sort of spoke about just the timing. It's a perfect piece of timing. Can you imagine if this had happened when I first got the job? It feels like the right place and the right time for me. And for all the guys, we're ready to keep building. All you ever ask for as a coach is to be able to coach good players. What can a guy like me ask for that's better than this?
He's true. I mean, he's progressed. He's improved every year. And this is the next step for the Nets organization and him as a coach. So now it's like, all right, Kenny, we'll see what you're made of. And can you keep up with your team's player development and to keep developing yourself?
Yeah, I really like how everything is sort of timed personally with Coach Kenny in terms of his growth and his sort of narrative as a coach. Like he said, if he had have gone into his first year, if you're looking at guys like Frank Vogel and teams who are thrust upon these superstars, and it's just like, okay, well, now how do I really establish myself as a coach here? Whereas Kenny was able to establish himself as a coach and sort of be the leader, the fulcrum, the sort of guy that players look up to because it was a young squad, because they were looking up to him. And then he had that with D'Angelo Russell. His player development has obviously been outstanding. It's what drew Kevin Durant and Kyrie, or at least part of what drew them to the Brooklyn Nets in the first place. So I think everything is timing up pretty well, and I think that this is the right time for Coach Kenny to become, a coach of superstars. And there is no better time than now for the Nets to really strike. And if the Nets are going to experience some high levels of success, Coach Kenny is going to be a big part of that.
Yeah, and I think around the league, like people view Kenny very highly, other teams, fans, and media. I was talking to somebody, one of the Denver writers, and they were saying, Kenny's going to win a Coach of the Year someday. And obviously, any type of praise like that from opposing teams or opposing media is always great.
Yeah, and we've spoken about that consistently, from guys like Doc Rivers, guys like Greg Popovich. But he's going to have his work cut out for him, and that's a good thing. We want him to sort of how he's going to integrate everything. We want the Nets to be great on both ends of the floor. In that sort of sense, Nick, there's probably going to be some more Nets news coming up. But for now, that's all I got. That's
amazing, Jack. Obviously, we'll be dropping some more player previews as well. Always a pleasure talking hoops with you, Jack, especially when it's Nets. And be sure to check out the show on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, NetsRepublic.com, Dash Radio, Google Play, and YouTube. All reviews and subscriptions are much appreciated.